fellow pen lovers and stationery enthusiasts, it's Christy here, Snarky Wordsworth over on Instagram and Reddit, and today I am going to be talking about my 4 unsung fountain pen heroes. These 4 pens are pens that I use pretty much every single day, but very rarely, if ever, talk about, for a myriad of reasons, mostly because I don't really swap the inks out all that much, and the inks tend toward dark gray, black, and maybe a dark blue-black. But because I do use them every day, I did want to sort of share why I really like these pens. So I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive on each of these 4, and hopefully this will shed some light on some really reliable pens that maybe you might want to add to your own collection. Okay, we are going to start things off with the Kaweco Brass Sport. Now, if you follow my channel, this is probably, of these 4 pens, the one that you've seen me show off the most. I do use this one a lot in size comparisons just because it is such a recognizable size. Lengthwise, it is the same as every other Kaweco Sport. What really changes things up is the material it's made from. So my Kaweco Brass Sport is in the extra fine. I use this exclusively in my everyday carry, which is just a traveler's notebook in the passport size. Since it's such a small little journal, I like to have a very, very fine line in this. So that's why I stick with the extra fine. Price-wise, I've seen it as low as around $70. I think even a little bit lower every once in a while on Amazon, but usually it's right around that $98 mark for the MSRP. This one is a cartridge converter. The Kaweco Sport converter is super teeny tiny, but you know, it does make it a little bit easier so you don't have to grab a syringe to refill the cartridges. So I do have this loaded up with a converter, and the trim on this guy is the silver color. Lengthwise, it is 108.2 millimeters when it's closed. When it's posted, it's 134.1 millimeters. It's quite a comfortable size, at least for me. And I do have small hands, so take that into consideration, but you can see how it falls. And I think the grip size is really good. It's a 9.4. So for a pocket pen, I think that's really reasonable. And again, for me, very comfortable. You can write with this unposted, or at least I can, but I would certainly only do that to jot notes down or something really, really quick. I don't think this is a long letter length, but it is possible. And when it's unposted, it's about 100 millimeters. So there you go for size. Now, weight is where it's probably going to make or break a lot of people. This is a 48 gram pen. That is a heavy pen. I love heavy pens. This and the Lamy 2000 in the stainless steel are a couple of my favorite weighted pens. But I know for other people, that's just way too much. I like it. I think that there's a comfort level. For me, I like having something a little bit heavy like that, especially when I am writing long letters. It doesn't cause me hand fatigue or anything like that. But again, I've definitely heard people who do not like that. So again, keep that in mind. 48 grams is quite heavy. Now you can see here that the extra fine is quite a nice extra fine. It's not quite as crazy fine as, say, a Japanese extra fine, but it is more fine than, like, say, a TWSBI extra fine, I would certainly say. And I don't know why that is, but I really like this. The one negative about this particular nib, and it could just be mine, is that it does write quite dry, so I have to use very wet inks in it, or at least semi-wet inks. Originally, I had been trying to use a couple of like dark purple gray inks from Robert Oster. They just were not viable. Super dry inks to begin with, and it was not, there were hard starts everywhere. So originally I was thinking, do I have to trade up to a fine nib and purchase a fine nib for this, but I just started using a couple of others. So now I usually have a rotation of Earl Grey, Fuyusyogun, and Armada in this. All of those are quite wet writing inks, and I never have hard starts with any of those, even if it's been a couple of days since I've written with it, which is very rare. But even so, there have been a few times when that's happened, and I've never had a hard start with any of those three. I have had hard starts, like I said, with a couple of Robert Oster's, Barossa, Grape, I want to say, and maybe it's Blue Black, which is a purple ink. I don't know why, but definitely is. Those both had hard starts. Even Diamine's Silver Fox, also ridiculously dry ink, especially for a Diamine, does not work in this. It's, for at least my extra fine in this, it's definitely not usable. But the ones I mentioned, like I said, Earl Grey, Fuyusyogun, and Armada are fantastic. I am thinking about sort of branching out into a couple other ones that I do know are a little wetter. So we'll see, but I do love those three, and I like that there's not too many colors in my annual collections journal, which is what I keep in here for the most part. So there are perks to kind of limiting the colors. But yeah, if you are looking for something that will take a beating, and I do think that's the other appeal of this brass, besides it being a nice weight for me and a good size, is that, you know, let's see if I can get like the little imperfections, the teeny tiny scratches, the color shift, which of course you see even more of there. All of those give it a really nice old world feel, and I really find that appealing. So I don't know, there's something about that combined with the leather journal cover that I find to be kind of a perfect match. So if you like that sort of aesthetic, definitely consider the Kaweco Brass Sport. It's definitely a pen that I don't ever see removing from my everyday rotation, and I just think it's a really great pen. All right, next up is my Traveler's Company fountain pen. This is one of my other favorite pens. I very rarely talk about it, but it's just such a fantastic, fantastic writer. Again, it's got a bit of that old world feel with the brass, and I don't know that it's just that factor that makes it so enjoyable, but there really is something to be said about these like earthy materials that pick up patina and that look even better the more they age. I just find something about that so attractive. Anyway, this is quite a small pen. This comes standard with a fine nib. It has the silver hardware against that brass. Its price range anywhere from around $50 all the way up to $69. That's generally where I've found it. There's also a lovely sort of light teal limited edition, if you can find that. That's ridiculously expensive on eBay right now, but it is also a very, very nice option if you like this size. This is a cartridge only pen, which I think is probably the only big drawback for me. I do get sometimes kind of frustrated with the extra time of like the syringe if I want to swap out a specific ink for one that comes in a cartridge. And then of course like the cartridges do start to wear over time. But like that's really kind of a negligible issue. It's not really that much trouble to grab a syringe and fill it that way, but it is something to consider because the Kaweco converter will not fit in a pen like in this particular pen. It's just too long. Lengthwise, when it's closed, it is 102.2 millimeters. When it is posted, it is 142.8 millimeters. Unposted, it is 83.2 millimeters. This is too small even for me. Like if I just needed to really quickly jot something, I could probably do it, but it is not the most comfortable thing in the world if it's not posted. That said, once it is posted, marvelously comfortable. You can see from how it falls, even a hand that is significantly larger than mine would probably be okay. The grip is only 7.7 millimeters, which kind of made me anxious at first. This reminds me of the size of the Pentel Slicka pen, which is like a very narrow gel pen. I cannot write with that thing. It cramps up my hand something fierce. But for whatever reason, this one is just fine. I don't know if it's the extra weight or what, but this is very comfortable. In fact, one of the most comfortable pens in my collection. It is 27 grams total, significantly lighter than the Kaweco Brass Sport. So if the weight element is a concern, this is certainly one to think about. Now, I started talking about the nib before. It's a fine nib, but this fine nib is phenomenal. So initially someone had told me they believed that this is a Schmidt-made nib. I have never found documentation to back that up, so I don't know why I was told that, but I can say that if you like the way the Schmidt nibs work, like if you have a Benu and you happen to like that, you might really enjoy this. This is a very wet writing nib. Enough so that if it were a medium, I don't think that I could use this. As it is, works beautifully with wet inks, really, really beautifully, but works also really nicely with dry inks. I actually have this inked up with Silver Fox from Diamine's 150th anniversary line. I can't write with that in my Kaweco Sport, but it works really well in this. Hold on one second and I will do a little close-up. For whatever reason, it is very, very dry, but you can see it is not problematic at all on here. Like, it actually looks absolutely lovely. And the line looks even finer on this with it because it is such a dry ink. If I use a very wet ink, the line gets quite broad on this particular nib, which isn't a problem. It's just something I always have to adjust to. But definitely keep that in mind. It is a wet writing nib and is so glassy smooth. Like, we're talking, in my opinion, close to like Pelican glassy. It's crazy and I absolutely love it. You can see like just how even everything is. There's never a hard start. It really does remind me of those Benu nibs. So I guess in that regard, maybe that's why someone thought it was a Schmidt. In any case, or if you happen to have like actual information like that's documented somewhere, please pop that in the comments. In any case, if you do like a wet writing nib, make sure you check this out. Super duper comfortable. Like I said, even with that narrow grip, it's one that I can write long, long letters with and have. This one is an everyday carry, but maybe not an everyday use. I carry this in my Superior Label tool pouch. Fits really perfectly in that front pocket. The only other thing that I keep in that front pocket is my little foldable scissors. But yeah, it just works really, really well. You can see it does add that extra 28 grams to everything, so keep that in mind. If you hate pens that have that little bit of extra weight, it might not be for you, but otherwise, this is a really wonderful pen and I would recommend it to pretty much anyone. All right, so next up is the Platinum Preppy in the wall line, and this is the Yagasuri design. Yagasuri just means like the arrow pattern. This is a pen that I have no qualms throwing in my bag, doing whatever with. I really, really enjoy it. And it's something that I think works well for beginners or for people who've been in the fountain pen hobby for a long time. So this one in particular comes standard with a fine nib, but I actually swap this with my extra fine nib a lot of times that I got in just my standard Platinum Preppy. And it's super duper easy to swap the nibs. I love that. You just pull the whole nib section out and then you swap them. So that's ridiculously convenient. And the other thing that's really nice is because it runs on the lower end price-wise, so I've seen the WA run anywhere from $5 all the way up to around $8. I don't get really anxious about this one. Like, if I need to just toss it into my bag, sometimes I do. Usually I'll use a pen case, but that's not always the case. And even though I've had this for probably a couple years now, the design hasn't worn away at all. I do post this and you won't see any scratches really around where like the posting line would be. So it's a pretty hardy pen. But the best part about it is the way that the nib writes. It is really reliable. I don't really experience hard starts. It just always has a nice wet glide across the page, and sometimes that's all I need. This usually sits on my desk next to my computer at home, but you know, even when I bring it with me after short flights and stuff, I never have any problems. I've never, thankfully, knock on wood, had any issues with like ink bursting or anything like that. It's just a really reliable pen. It's also a really good size. This one, when it's closed, is 133 millimeters. When it's posted, and like I said, I do post it, it runs 154 millimeters. So it works well in a smaller hand, but it would certainly work well in a larger hand too. Unposted, if you are not a pen poster, it runs around 122 millimeters. This one has a great grip size. It's 10 millimeters. So if you don't like something that's super chunky, definitely is a nice sweet spot. If you don't like something that's too narrow, again, that 10 millimeter mark I think is a good size for most people. And weight-wise, it's 13 grams. Very light pen, but not like fly weight. So you feel like you're going to fling it somewhere if you accidentally gesture too much. Now, the nib quality of writing is really nice. I have the fine in here right now, but super consistent, no burping whatsoever, no hard starts. It's just a really, really nice even line. It's very comfortable to write with. Now this one, I usually have my platinum carbon black in just so I can have like a water resistant ink at all times. Like I said, it does sit just next to my computer on my desk, so that's always a nice feature. But right now I just have it with the platinum black. I actually ran out of my cartridges, and I do tend to use the cartridges just for, you know, ease of use in this one. But the platinum black works really, really well in it as well. You can see it's still a lovely even line, really, really consistent ink, and a really consistent writing pen. So yeah, there are tons and tons of designs in the Preppy. I also have Preppy, which is the white design. It just lives on my work desk. Like I said, it's a nice reliable pen, so it's nice to have one there at the office. But you also have tons of different designs. You have multiple colors in the first edition lines. I think there's like a blue and a green and a red, and maybe like a yellow or an orange. And then there are also several other traditional Japanese designs in the wall line, which I love. So if you like a little bit more of that sort of traditional design style, check out the wall line, because like I said, those are definitely my favorites looks wise. But the actual design of the pen, the weight, all of that is pretty much the same across the board. So if you like the way one feels in your hand, you will probably like the way another one does. The big thing would be that original line does have like the extra fine and other size options, whereas the Wa and the Perpanip only come with the fine nib. So if you want other sizes, you'd have to buy another nib so that you could get that section, another pen so that you could get that section to swap it. Anyway, if you are looking for a reliable, really comfortably budgeted pen, make sure you check out the Platinum Preppy in any of the lines. Great, great, reliable pen. All right, the last of my Unsung fountain pen heroes is the newest addition to my lineup, and that is the Platinum Curidas in the Graphite Smoke colorway. This is one of those clicker pens. You know, I love a clicker pen. This one is in the extra fine. It is a very, very extra fine nib, but I do really, really like it. It's quite convenient. I use this when I just need to jot something really quickly. With it being such a fine nib, it'll write pretty well on almost any of my papers. It doesn't matter if it's like a Tomoe River or, you know, like crappy copier paper, still works without very much feathering at all, because that line of ink is so small, which is, I think, one of those things that I really, really love about an extra fine nib in general. And then again, that clicky element, which, you know, pulls away any extra time that you would actually have to take with untwisting the cap, is just like a nice convenience factor. So the Platinum Curidas usually runs anywhere from around $45 to $100, depending on what shop you pick it up at. It is a cartridge converter pen, so whatever your preference, you have options. This one, of course, is in the silver trim, and it's a very stylish pen, I think. I like it a lot. Looks-wise, definitely has a bit of like a futuristic vibe to it with that transparency. So the Curidas runs around 152.7 millimeters long overall. Obviously, there's no posted size because you don't post it, nor do you have it unposted. But weight-wise, it runs around 24 grams. That's actually a little bit heavier than the Traveler's Brass fountain pen. So it's a decently weighted pen. The grip is where I think people might have a little bit of a issue. So this is a 13.3 millimeter diameter pen. For me, it's almost a little too broad in that section. I definitely prefer something around a 10, maybe 11. And that 13, it definitely takes me a little bit to get used to. Other people might also really hate this pen clip, but the nice thing about the pen clip is it can be removed, so if you absolutely detest it, you don't have to keep it there, which is a nice option that, say, like the Vanishing Point and the Decimo don't have. That said, I much prefer the grip size of both the Vanishing Point and the Decimo, so they're toss-ups. But beyond that, it's a really quite comfortable pen as far as weight and everything like that. It's very balanced and is just in general a nice pen to write with. I did mention that this pen is quite fine, like surprisingly fine even for an extra fine. So much so that it borders on scratchy, especially if I don't put the right kind of ink in here. So I pretty much always use a very wet ink. Right now I have this inked up with Diatramentus Document Fog Gray, which for me is quite a wet ink. But anytime I've tried an average to dry flowing ink, it's had a lot of hard starts. It definitely feels quite scratchy. So just keep that in mind. Whenever I use a wet ink, perfectly fine. And it could just be my nib. That's all the other thing. You might get an extra fine that is significantly wetter than this, or that just plays better with certain inks. There are always going to be those little micro differences that change a writer's experience. The way you hold your pen, how much pressure you put when you're writing with the pen itself, everything makes at least a little bit of difference. So definitely keep that in mind. All that said, I do think this is such a convenient pen. Any clicker is a wonderful pen to add to your collection if you want something that doesn't require really any extra time, because again, I do understand people don't necessarily like the twist tops or even the snap caps. There's none of that. If you can use a Bic pen, you can use one of these clickies. And I do love that. Also love the fact that if you hate having to hold your pen in a very specific direction, you can make the adjustment and remove the clip that otherwise would require you to hold it like this. Those are the nice kinds of options that Platinum included. And in addition to it just being a really convenient pen, those kinds of thought within the design are always good selling points for me. So definitely recommended to give a try, especially if you're looking for a clicky pen. Okay, so those were my 4 unsung fountain pen heroes. If you have any questions or comments about these particular pens, please pop those in the comments below. Or if you happen to have unsung fountain pen heroes of your own, I'd love to hear what those are, either in the comments or potentially in another video. I would love to watch videos about this kind of thing. If this particular video was of any use to you, if it was entertaining, informative, please consider giving me a like or potentially even subscribing to the channel. As always, thank you so much for joining me. It's always so delightful to kind of share my thoughts and my experiences with fountain pens, and I love being able to interact with fellow fountain pen lovers. That's definitely one of my favorite parts of this entire hobby. If you have made it to the end of this video, you are everything that is awesome. Thank you again so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you. next time. Bye-bye!